The Russian Mafia boss was toasting to love. When the black waitress suddenly whispered, "Run now." "When he raises his glass," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the orchestra, "drop your tray and run. Don't look back, don't stop. Just run." Her eyes, dark, intense, filled with an urgency I'd never seen before, locked with mine for just a heartbeat. Then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. I stood frozen, champagne flutes trembling slightly on my tray as Mikhail Volkov, the most feared man in Brighton Beach, tapped his crystal glass with a silver spoon. The room fell silent. "Tonight," he began, his Russian accent thick with emotion, "I toast not only to my beautiful fiancée but to all of you who have supported our family's enterprises." My heart hammered against my ribs. Abandon my post? 3 years of perfect service, of invisibility, of survival, all to throw it away on the word of a stranger? "In this business, loyalty is everything," Volkov continued, raising his glass higher. "And betrayal." The explosion that cut off his words made the decision for me. The west wall of the ballroom erupted in flames and shattered glass. My tray clattered to the marble floor as screams replaced the music. And I ran. Have you ever had a moment when your entire life changed because you trusted a stranger? When everything you thought you knew about yourself was tested in a single heartbeat? This is that story, my story, and I'm still not sure if I made the right choice. But I'm alive to tell it, which is more than I can say for many who were in that ballroom that night. My name is Andrei Petrov. 3 years ago, I arrived in America with nothing but $200 sewn into the lining of my jacket and a cousin's address scribbled on a scrap of paper. The American dream, right? Turns out dreams cost more than $200. My cousin Nikolai wasn't exactly thrilled to see me. His one-bedroom apartment in Brighton Beach already housed 3 other recent immigrants, all of us chasing that elusive better life. But he let me sleep on his couch for 2 weeks before the ultimatum came: find work or find somewhere else to stay. Brighton Beach, Little Odessa they call it, isn't the America you see in movies. It's a slice of the old country transplanted onto Atlantic shores, where Russian is spoken more than English and the real power doesn't sit in government offices. It sits in restaurants like the Volkov Hotel, where men with expensive watches and cold eyes make decisions that affect everyone. I got lucky. The Volkov needed dishwashers, and dishwashers don't need perfect English or work permits that aren't forged. 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. My hands stayed pruned in scalding water while I scraped caviar from porcelain plates that cost more than my monthly wage. I was good, quiet, observant. After 8 months, I moved from the sinks to the floor, carrying trays instead of washing them. The pay was better, especially the tips, which meant I could finally move out of Nikolai's crowded apartment into a room of my own. A tiny room above a bakery that smelled perpetually of rye bread, but mine nonetheless. For 3 years, I lived in the shadows of the Volkov Hotel's glittering ballroom. I learned to be invisible while seeing everything. The business deals sealed with vodka instead of signatures. The politicians who came through the private entrance. The women who arrived on the arms of one man and left with another. I saved every dollar I could. Just 2 more years, I told myself. 2 more years and I'd have enough to move west, maybe to Chicago or Denver. Somewhere without an ocean to remind me of the one I'd crossed. Somewhere I could start fresh with enough capital to build something legitimate. Then came the night of Mikhail Volkov's engagement party. The ballroom of the Volkov Hotel had never looked more opulent. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Ice sculptures of swans flanked a champagne fountain that bubbled with actual Dom Perignon. The air was heavy with the scent of white roses and money, so much money it made your teeth ache. Volkov himself stood at the center of it all, a man whose very presence seemed to bend the room around him. At 45, his dark hair was threaded with distinguished silver at the temples, his face handsome in that severe Slavic way, all sharp angles and penetrating gray eyes. His midnight blue suit probably cost more than everything I owned, including my organs. On his arm hung Natalia Sorokina, his new fiancée. 26, willowy, with the kind of blonde beauty that seemed almost artificial in its perfection. Her diamond engagement ring caught the light with every graceful movement of her hand, sending prisms dancing across the walls. The daughter of a Moscow businessman with connections that even I, in my limited position, knew were valuable to Volkov's import business. Another successful year, A silver-haired man in a custom tuxedo raised his glass toward Volkov. To family enterprises that only grow stronger. To family, Volkov agreed, his accent thick but precise. And to love, which I have finally found after all these years. The crowd raised their glasses in unison, a choreographed moment of celebration. I circulated with fresh champagne, my eyes downcast but alert. 3 years of working these events had taught me to read the room. The genuine smiles, the forced ones, the subtle tensions beneath the polished veneer. That's when I noticed her. Unlike the other servers who were all Eastern European like myself, she stood out. Tall, elegant, with deep brown skin and closely cropped natural hair that framed features that belonged on a runway. She moved with a grace that made even the simple act of carrying a tray seem like a dance. New staff wasn't unusual, but something about her felt different. Her eyes, unlike mine, weren't downcast. They were observant, calculating. Our paths crossed near the dessert table as I collected empty glasses. First night. I asked quietly, breaking protocol. Servers weren't supposed to chat during events. She glanced at me, her dark eyes meeting mine briefly. Yes. Lucky me, starting with the party of the year. Her voice carried no accent I could place. American, but not Brooklyn or any New York borough I recognized. Stick close to the walls. Avoid eye contact unless they speak to you directly, and never, ever comment on conversations you overhear, I advised, keeping my voice low. A slight smile curved her lips. Sounds like good life advice in general. Before I could respond, Dmitry Volkov's head of security appeared at my elbow. His presence always made the temperature drop several degrees. Andrei, he said, my name sounding like an accusation in his mouth. Mr. Volkov requests fresh glasses for a special toast. The crystal, not this. He gestured dismissively at my tray. Right away, I nodded, turning toward the service area. As I moved away, I caught the new waitress watching our interaction, her expression unreadable. If you've ever felt that strange prickle at the back of your neck, that sixth sense warning that something isn't right, you'll understand what I felt as I pushed through the kitchen doors. Something about tonight felt off. The security was tighter than usual. Dmitry's men positioned at every exit. The way Volkov's smile seemed fixed, never quite reaching his eyes. Or maybe it was just her. The waitress who didn't belong, whose gaze held too much intelligence for someone meant to be invisible. The night progressed in a blur of champagne flutes and forced smiles. Volkov made several toasts, each more emotional than the last as the alcohol flowed freely. His usual reserve seemed to have melted away in the warmth of celebration and his fiancée's adoring gaze. To new beginnings, he declared, his arm wrapped possessively around Natalia's waist. To leaving the past behind and embracing a future of legitimacy and respect. The crowd murmured their approval. Everyone knew what legitimacy meant. Volkov's recent investments in real estate development, his donations to political campaigns, his carefully cultivated image as a businessman rather than what he truly was. A man whose fortune was built on broken bodies and smuggled contraband. It was during one such toast that I noticed something odd. The new waitress had positioned herself directly behind Volkov's table, serving the guests seated there. Nothing unusual in that, except for the intensity with which she was listening to a conversation between Volkov and a man I recognized as Viktor Baranov, his second in command. Their voices were too low for me to hear from my position, but whatever they were discussing had caused Volkov's expression to harden momentarily before his public smile returned. The waitress's hand trembled slightly as she poured water, the only visible crack in her composed demeanor. I tried to keep my distance after that. Something about her made me nervous, a feeling I couldn't afford in a place like the Volkov. Survival depended on routine, on predictability, on never standing out. The evening wore on. Midnight approached. Guests began to drift toward the coat check, their faces flushed with expensive champagne and the peculiar satisfaction that comes from proximity to power. I found myself stationed near the main entrance, collecting empty glasses from departing guests. That's when she appeared at my side, materializing from the crowd like a ghost. Her tray was empty, her eyes wide with an urgency that made my pulse quicken. When he raises his glass, she whispered, her voice barely audible, drop your tray and run. Don't look back, don't stop. Just run. Before I could question her, she was gone, gliding back into the crowd with that same effortless grace. I stood frozen, her words echoing in my mind. Drop everything and run? It was absurd. I'd lose my job, possibly face charges for the damaged crystal. Yet something in her eyes had conveyed such genuine fear that I couldn't dismiss it. Across the room Volkov stood, tapping his glass with a silver spoon. The crystalline ring silenced the crowd as all eyes turned to him. Natalia beamed at his side, her hand resting on his arm. "Tonight," Volkov began, his voice carrying across the hushed ballroom, "I toast not only to my beautiful fiancée but to all of you who have supported our family's enterprises through the years." My heart hammered against my ribs as I scanned the room for the mysterious waitress. She stood near the kitchen doors, her eyes locked on mine, giving an almost imperceptible nod. "In this business, loyalty is everything," Volkov continued, raising his glass higher. "And betrayal." I never heard the end of his sentence. The first explosion rocked the far side of the ballroom, shattering windows and sending guests screaming to the floor. My tray clattered to the marble as instinct took over. I ran. Behind me, chaos erupted. More explosions, gunshots, screams. I burst through the service entrance into the kitchen, where staff were frozen in confusion and fear. Without stopping, I pushed through the back exit into the frigid February air, my lungs burning as I sprinted down the alley behind the hotel. The cold hit me like a physical blow after the warmth of the ballroom. Snow had begun to fall, fat flakes illuminated by the distant glow of emergency lights. I ran without direction, without thought, my dress shoes slipping on the icy pavement. All I knew was that I needed to put distance between myself and the Volkov. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. I cut through another alley, then another, the familiar grid of Brighton Beach becoming a maze in my panic. My breath came in ragged gasps, visible in the freezing air. I had no coat, no wallet, nothing but the clothes on my back and the thundering certainty that my life as I knew it was over. I made it 3 blocks before ducking into the doorway of a closed bodega, my chest heaving, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. The distant wail of sirens filled the night as emergency vehicles raced toward the Volkov Hotel. Through gaps between buildings I could see flames licking at the sky, black smoke billowing against the snow. "You made it out." I nearly jumped out of my skin at the voice. The waitress stood in the shadows of the doorway, her server's uniform discarded, replaced by dark jeans and a leather jacket. Up close, without the dim lighting of the ballroom, I could see the intensity in her eyes more clearly. "What? Who are you?" I managed between breaths. "What just happened back there?" "Federal agent," she said simply. "Undercover operation that just went very wrong. Someone leaked our raid timing to Volkov's people. They were prepared." "Raid? Federal?" My mind struggled to catch up. "You're a cop." "Something like that." She glanced over her shoulder at the distant chaos. "Look, you need to disappear for a while. Volkov's people saw you run. They'll assume you were involved." The reality of my situation crashed down on me. 3 years of keeping my head down, saving every penny, planning my escape from a life I'd fallen into through desperation and bad choices. All of it potentially destroyed in an instant. "I don't understand," I said, my voice hollow. "Why warn me? You don't know me." Her expression softened slightly. 3 weeks of surveillance. You're not one of them. Just in the wrong place. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "There's cash and an address. Go there tonight. Ask for Marcus. He'll help you disappear until this blows over." I stared at the envelope, not reaching for it. "And if I don't?" "Then pray Volkov didn't survive that blast," she said bluntly. "Because if he did, he'll hunt down everyone he suspects of betrayal, including the server who ran before the explosions started." My hand shook as I finally took the envelope. "I don't even know your name." "Better that way." She stepped back toward the street. "Good luck, Andrei." "Wait," I called after her. "Why help me? You risked your cover." She paused, looking back with an expression I couldn't quite read. "My brother worked for people like Volkov. Nobody warned him when things went bad." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Sometimes we get a chance to break the cycle." With that, she disappeared into the night, leaving me alone with an envelope full of cash, an address scrawled on a scrap of paper, and the distant sound of sirens painting the Brooklyn sky red and blue. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, my life before and after cleaved by a single moment. A stranger's whispered warning and the decision to run. Whatever came next, I knew with absolute certainty that I could never go back to the person I was before she spoke those words. The envelope contained $800 in 20s and 50s, along with an address in Red Hook. Not exactly the safest neighborhood, but far enough from Brighton Beach to offer some breathing room. I had no phone, no ID, nothing but the clothes on my back and this mysterious lifeline. A police car screamed past the end of the street, lights flashing but no siren. I pressed deeper into the shadows. Whatever had happened at the Volkov, it was big. The kind of big that would have every cop in Brooklyn looking for suspects and witnesses. I needed to move. Standing still in February without a coat was a death sentence anyway. I tucked the envelope into my pocket and stepped back onto the street, keeping my head down, trying to look like someone with a destination rather than a man whose entire life had just imploded. The snow was falling harder now, already coating the sidewalks with a treacherous layer of white. I walked quickly, hands shoved into my pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold. Each step took me further from the life I'd built, from the meager security I'd scraped together over 3 years of service. But also, perhaps, toward something else. Something I couldn't yet name. If you've ever had everything stripped away in an instant, you know the strange clarity that comes with it. When all your plans and possessions vanish, what remains is the essential question. Who are you when everything else is gone? I was about to find out. Red Hook loomed before me like a concrete fortress, industrial and unwelcoming in the pre-dawn darkness. The address led me to a converted warehouse, its brick facade weathered by decades of Atlantic storms. No sign marked its purpose, just a heavy metal door with a small intercom panel. I pressed the button, snow melting in my hair, my fingers numb with cold. After a long moment, a voice crackled through the speaker. "State your business." "I'm looking for Marcus," I said, my voice hoarse from the cold. "I was told he could help me." "Who sent you?" I hesitated. The waitress hadn't given me her name. "A federal agent. From the Volkov operation tonight." Silence stretched so long I thought they'd abandoned me. Then a metallic click as the door unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped into a dimly lit hallway that smelled of damp concrete and old coffee. A man waited at the end of the corridor, tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped gray hair and the watchful eyes of someone who'd seen too much. He wore jeans and a faded FDNY sweatshirt, but his posture screamed military. "You the server?" he asked, his voice matching the one from the intercom. I nodded, suddenly aware of how I must look in my sodden uniform, shivering and wild-eyed. "I'm Marcus." He didn't offer his hand. Zoe called ahead. "Said you needed somewhere to lay low." Zoe. The waitress had a name after all. "Come on," Marcus continued, turning away. "Let's get you warmed up before you catch pneumonia. That's all we need." A Russian with a death rattle giving away our location. I followed him through a maze of corridors into what appeared to be a converted loft space. Exposed brick walls, industrial windows covered with blackout curtains, mismatched furniture that looked salvaged rather than chosen. A woman sat at a computer station in the corner, her attention fixed on multiple screens displaying news feeds and what looked like security camera footage. "This is Talia," Marcus said. "She runs tech." "Talia, this is Andrei Petrov," I supplied when he trailed off expectantly. "The server from Volkov's," she said without looking up. "You're all over the news, you know." "Well, not you specifically, but the event." She tapped a key and one of her screens enlarged to show helicopter footage of the Volkov Hotel. Flames still licked from the upper floors, emergency vehicles surrounding the building like vultures around a carcass. 7 confirmed dead so far, she continued, her tone clinically detached. Including Viktor Baranov and 2 NYPD officers who were on Volkov's payroll. Volkov himself is unaccounted for. My stomach lurched. 7 people dead. And Volkov missing, which could mean anything. "Here." Marcus thrust a bundle of clothes at me. "Bathrooms through there. Get changed. Those wet clothes are just making you colder." The bathroom was small but clean, with a shower that promised blessed warmth. I peeled off my soaked uniform, noticing for the first time that specks of blood dotted the white shirt. Not mine. Someone else's. Someone who might be among the 7 dead. The clothes Marcus had given me were plain but dry. Jeans, a thermal shirt, a navy hoodie, thick socks. All slightly too large but infinitely better than what I'd been wearing. I emerged feeling marginally more human, though the reality of my situation still seemed surreal. Marcus handed me a mug of coffee strong enough to strip paint. Sit. Eat. He gestured to a sandwich on the table. Then we talk. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until the first bite. Suddenly ravenous, I devoured the sandwich while Marcus watched with the patient assessment of someone used to handling people in crisis. So, he said when I'd finished. What do you know? Nothing, I answered honestly. I was working the party. This waitress, Zoe, told me to run when Volkov made his toast. Then everything exploded. You didn't know about the raid? No. I didn't even know she was federal until after. Marcus exchanged a glance with Talia, some silent communication passing between them. The operation was supposed to be clean, he finally said. Coordinated FBI and DA raid. Time to catch Volkov and his top lieutenants during the party. They've been building a case for years. Human trafficking, drug distribution, money laundering. The works. But someone tipped them off, I guessed. More than tipped off. They were waiting. Had explosives rigged. When the tactical team breached, they triggered the charges. His jaw tightened. It was a massacre. I set down my coffee, suddenly nauseous. And Zoe? Is she okay? Agent Zoe Harrington is fine, Talia called from her station. Just checked in. She's gone dark, though. Too hot for her to come in right now. What is this place? I asked, looking around. Some kind of safe house. Marcus's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. Something like that. Let's just say we provide assistance to certain operations when official channels get complicated. You're not federal? I was. Now I'm private sector. Specialized security consulting. Which told me absolutely nothing while sounding vaguely legitimate. I was too exhausted to press further. Why am I here? I asked instead. I'm nobody. Just a server. A server who ran before the explosions, Talia pointed out, finally turning from her screens. That makes you either psychic or involved. Volkov's people will assume the latter. But I'm not. Doesn't matter what you are, Marcus cut in. Matters what they think you are. And right now, with Volkov in the wind and his organization in chaos, they'll be looking for someone to blame. The reality of my situation sank in deeper. I wasn't just unemployed, I was hunted. By people who solved problems with violence and disposed of bodies where they'd never be found. How long do I need to stay here? I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. Until we figure out if Volkov survived and if he did, what his next move is. Marcus stood, collecting my empty mug. Could be days. Could be weeks. I can't just disappear for weeks. I have rent due. I stopped, realizing how absurd I sounded. What did rent matter when my life was at stake? Your apartment isn't safe, Talia said, her tone gentler now. They'll check there first. Is there anyone who would notice if you vanished? Family? Girlfriend? I thought of my sparse social circle. Fellow immigrants too busy surviving to form deep connections. A landlord who cared only that the rent arrived on time. Co-workers who knew me only as the quiet server who never caused trouble. No, I admitted. No one who would report me missing, at least. That's something, at least, Marcus said. Makes our job easier. A buzzer sounded and Talia's attention snapped back to her screens. We've got movement at the south entrance. Marcus tensed, hand moving instinctively to his waistband where I suspected a weapon was concealed. Friendly. It's Zoe, Talia confirmed, relief evident in her voice. And she's not alone. Minutes later, Zoe strode into the room, still in the dark jeans and leather jacket she'd worn earlier. Behind her came a man I recognized immediately. Dmitry Volkov's head of security, the man whose very presence had always made the temperature drop. His hands were zip-tied before him, his face bruised, a cut above his eye still seeping blood. Change of plans, Zoe announced, shoving Dmitry into a chair. Our friend here has some very interesting information about who sold out the operation. Her eyes found mine, widening slightly in surprise. Andrei, you made it. As instructed, I replied, unable to take my eyes off Dmitry, who stared back at me with cold recognition. The server, he spat in Russian. I knew you were involved. He wasn't, Zoe replied in perfect Russian, surprising us both. But you weren't you, Dmitry? The question is who you were really working for. Because it wasn't Volkov. The room seemed to shrink around us, tension crackling like static electricity. Whatever I had stumbled into was far bigger and more dangerous than I had imagined. And somehow I was now at its center. Have you ever felt like a pawn suddenly finding itself in the middle of a chess game played by grandmasters? That's how I felt watching Zoe circle Dmitri like a predator, realizing that my fate was now entangled with forces I barely understood. I want immunity, Dmitri said, switching to English, his accent thicker than usual. Full protection. New identity. You're not in a position to negotiate, Marcus replied, his tone flat. You think not. Dmitri's smile was all teeth, no warmth. You have no idea what's coming. Who's involved? I'm offering you the bigger fish. Zoe and Marcus exchanged glances. A silent conversation passed between them, the kind that comes from years of working together. We'll discuss terms after you give us something worth trading for, Zoe finally said. He turned to me. Andrei, you should get some rest. There's a room down the hall. It was a dismissal, clear and firm. Whatever Dmitri was about to reveal, I wasn't meant to hear it. But as I moved toward the door, he called after me in Russian. Sleep well, little ghost. You were always watching, weren't you? Always listening. I wonder what secrets you've collected without even knowing their value. I froze, his words hitting like ice water. Zoe's hand on my shoulder guided me firmly out of the room. Ignore him, she murmured. He's trying to get under your skin. He's succeeding, I admitted. She studied me for a moment, her dark eyes unreadable. Get some sleep. We'll talk in the morning. The room was little more than a glorified closet with a cot, but after the night I'd had, it felt like luxury. I collapsed onto the thin mattress, expecting sleep to claim me instantly. Instead, I lay awake, Dmitri's words echoing in my mind. Little ghost. Always watching. Always listening. He was right. For 3 years I had been invisible, a background fixture in a world of powerful, dangerous men. I had overheard conversations, witnessed meetings, seen documents left carelessly on tables. None of it had seemed significant at the time, just the background noise of my existence. But what if I had seen something important without realizing it? What if I knew something that made me more than just a server who ran at the right moment? Sleep finally came, but it was fitful, filled with dreams of explosions and Volkov's cold eyes watching me from the flames. I woke to the sound of raised voices. Daylight filtered through a small, high window, telling me I'd slept for at least a few hours. I pulled on the borrowed clothes and followed the voices to the main room. Zoe and Marcus were facing off, tension vibrating between them. Talia watched from her station, her expression wary. Dmitri was nowhere to be seen. Can't just change the parameters mid-operation, Marcus was saying, his voice controlled but angry. I'm not changing anything, Zoe countered. I'm adapting to new intelligence. That's the job. The job was to bring down Volkov's organization, not start a war with the Bratva. If what Dmitri's saying is true, that's a big if, coming from a man who would sell his own mother for the right price. They noticed me then, both falling silent. Zoe recovered first, her professional mask sliding back into place. Andrei. Good, you're up. We need to talk. Where's Dmitri? I asked, looking around. Secure location, Marcus answered, which I took to mean somewhere else in the building. Turns out our friend had quite a story to tell. One that changes things, Zoe added, shooting Marcus a look that suggested their disagreement was far from resolved. Especially for you. My stomach tightened. For me? Why? Zoe gestured to the table where a laptop was open. Because according to Dmitri, Volkov wasn't the primary target last night. The raid was a cover for something else. The assassination of Anton Kravchenko. The name meant nothing to me. I shook my head. Anton Kravchenko, she continued, was a high-ranking member of the Russian FSB in New York unofficially to meet with Volkov. He was killed in the explosion. I don't understand what this has to do with me. Kravchenko was carrying information, the kind that gets people at the highest levels of government very nervous. Information about Russian interference in upcoming elections, about compromised officials, about operations on American soil. Zoe's eyes never left mine. Dmitri claims Volkov was brokering a deal to sell this information to the highest bidder. And you believe him? We're verifying. But if he's telling the truth, it means last night wasn't just a botched raid. It was an orchestrated hit designed to look like collateral damage from a federal operation gone wrong. The implications were staggering. Who would have the power to do that? That's the million-dollar question, Marcus said grimly. And the reason we need to move you immediately. Move me? Why? Zoe turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was security footage from the Volkov Hotel. Not from the night of the explosion but from weeks earlier. It showed the hotel's private dining room, where Volkov sat with a man I didn't recognize. Elegant, silver-haired, with the confident posture of someone accustomed to power. This is Kravchenko, Zoe said, pointing to the silver-haired man. And this, she tapped a key and the footage zoomed in on the background where I stood against the wall serving drinks, is you. One of only 3 people in the room during a meeting that apparently never should have happened. I stared at the image of myself, remembering the night vaguely. Just another private dinner I'd worked, one of dozens. The other 2 people in that room are now dead, Marcus said bluntly. Which makes you the only living witness to a meeting between a Russian intelligence officer and an American asset. Asset? I echoed. Volkov was working for Russian intelligence? Or American, Zoe said. Or playing both sides. We don't know yet. But someone thinks you might know something, might have overheard something critical. I didn't, I insisted. I don't remember anything special about that dinner. It doesn't matter what you actually know, Marcus said. It matters what they think you know. And right now there are some very powerful people who want to make sure you don't talk to anyone. The reality of my situation hit me with fresh force. I wasn't just hiding from Volkov's men anymore. I was caught in something much bigger, much more dangerous. So what happens now? Asked, my mouth dry. Now we get you out of New York, Zoe said. Immediately. To where? Better you don't know until we're on the move, Marcus cut in. Talia's working on new identification for you. We leave in an hour. He moved away to confer with Talia, leaving me alone with Zoe. She studied me with those intense eyes that seemed to see right through me. I'm sorry, she said quietly. This isn't what I intended when I warned you to run. What did you intend? To save an innocent bystander. To not have another civilian casualty on my conscience. She looked away. I didn't know you'd been at that meeting. Didn't know you'd be valuable. Is that what I am now? Valuable? To the right people, information is the most valuable commodity there is. She met my eyes again. And right now they think you have it. But I don't, I insisted. I don't remember anything special about that dinner. Memory is strange, she said. Sometimes we see and hear things without consciously registering them. Sometimes they come back when triggered. A chill ran through me. You think I know something without knowing I know it. It's possible. And it makes you either an asset to be protected or a loose end to be eliminated, depending on who finds you first. The weight of her words settled over me like a shroud. 3 days ago I had been invisible, a ghost moving through the world of the powerful without leaving a trace. Now I was visible, hunted, because of something I might have witnessed without even realizing it. There's something else, Zoe said, her voice dropping lower. Something Dmitri said that I haven't shared with Marcus yet. I waited, tension coiling in my stomach. He claims Volkov survived the explosion, and that he's looking for you specifically. Why would Volkov care about me? Because apparently right before everything went sideways he saw me whisper to you. He thinks we're connected. That you're part of whatever happened. The room seemed to tilt slightly. And is he right? Are you really federal? Or is that another lie? Her expression hardened. I am FBI, Andrei. That much is true. The rest. She glanced toward Marcus, who was still deep in conversation with Talia. The rest is complicated. Complicated how? Before she could answer, the building's alarm system blared to life. Talia's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up security feeds. We've got company, she called, her voice tight. 3 SUVs heavily armed. They've breached the outer perimeter. Marcus was already moving, pulling weapons from a hidden compartment in the wall. How the hell did they find us? Doesn't matter, Zoe said, grabbing a go bag from under the table. We need to move. Now. He tossed me a jacket. Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say. As gunfire erupted somewhere in the building, I realized that the stranger who had told me to run had just become my only hope of survival. This way, Zoe hissed, gripping my arm and pulling me toward a door I hadn't noticed before, camouflaged in the brick wall. She punched a code into a hidden keypad, and the door slid open to reveal a narrow corridor. Emergency exit. Leads to the subway tunnels. Behind us, Marcus was distributing weapons to Talia and two other people who had materialized from elsewhere in the building. We'll hold them off. Get him to the extraction point. What about Dmitri? I asked as Zoe pushed me through the doorway. Not our problem anymore, she replied grimly. The hidden corridor was dimly lit by emergency lights, the air stale and damp. We moved quickly, the sounds of gunfire growing more distant with each step. My mind raced with questions, but survival instinct kept me silent, focused on following Zoe through the labyrinthine passage. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only minutes, we reached a metal ladder bolted to the wall. Zoe pointed up. Service tunnel. Connects to the G-line. Go. I climbed, my hands slick with sweat on the cold metal rungs. At the top, I pushed open a heavy grate and emerged into a maintenance tunnel running alongside subway tracks. Zoe followed, securing the grate behind us. How did they find us? I asked, finally breaking the silence as we jogged along the narrow walkway. Someone talked, she replied, her breath even despite our pace. Or we were tracked. Either way, our safe house network is compromised. Those weren't Volkov's men, were they? She glanced at me sharply. What makes you say that? Volkov's security uses Makarovs. Russian-made. I heard the gunfire. That was American. Heavier. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. You know your weapons. I did my military service before coming to America. And you learn to recognize certain sounds when you work for people like Volkov. She nodded, conceding the point. No, those weren't Volkov's men. They're private contractors. Mercenaries. Working for who? That's the question, isn't it? She slowed as we approached a junction in the tunnel. This way. There's a station access point ahead. We emerged into the Bergen Street station through a maintenance door, blending into the morning commuter crowd. I was acutely aware of how we must look, disheveled, tense, my borrowed clothes ill-fitting. But New Yorkers had perfected the art of not seeing what wasn't their business. Zoe guided us onto a Manhattan-bound train, positioning us in the center of the crowded car. As the doors closed and the train lurched forward, she finally relaxed marginally, her shoulders dropping a fraction of an inch. We need to keep moving, she said quietly. Change trains a few times, make sure we're not followed. Then I'll get you to the new extraction point. And then what? Witness protection? A new identity in some small town where I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Would you prefer the alternative? Her eyes were hard. Because I can leave you at the next station if that's what you want. I held her gaze. What I want is the truth. All of it. No more, it's complicated, or need to know. If I'm risking my life, I deserve to know why. The train rattled through the tunnel, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. For a long moment I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she sighed, something in her expression shifting. Volkov wasn't just a criminal, Andrei. He was an asset. Recruited by the CIA 15 years ago when he was still a mid-level enforcer for the Bratva. They helped him build his empire, protected him from prosecution, in exchange for information on Russian operations in the US. A double agent, I murmured. Triple, maybe quadruple by now. The problem with assets like Volkov is they're never loyal to anyone but themselves. She lowered her voice further as the train slowed for a station. 6 months ago he started feeding information to the FSB about CIA operations. Playing both sides. Then he connected with Kravchenko, who had his own agenda. Which was? Kravchenko had compiled evidence of Russian interference in American politics. Not just the election meddling everyone knows about, but deeper, more insidious operations. Officials who've been compromised, judges, military leaders. He was looking to sell it to the highest bidder. And the dinner I witnessed was the initial meeting, where Kravchenko showed Volkov what he had and Volkov agreed to broker the sale. The train doors opened at J Street. Zoe nodded toward the exit and we slipped out with the crowd, immediately heading for a different line. So who attacked the safe house? I asked as we descended another escalator. The Russians? The CIA? That's what I'm trying to figure out. She checked her phone, frowning at whatever she saw there. There are factions within our own government who would rather this information never see the light of day. and others who would kill to get their hands on it. And where do you fall in all this? She didn't answer immediately, guiding us onto an uptown A train. Only when we were moving again did she speak. I was assigned to the Volkov case 3 years ago. Standard organized crime investigation. We build the case, make the arrests, dismantle the organization. By the book. Her mouth twisted. Then I discovered the CIA connection. My superiors told me to back off. I didn't. So you went rogue? I went looking for the truth. Found Marcus and his team, former intelligence officers who'd been pushed out for asking the wrong questions. They've been helping me build a parallel investigation off the books. Into what exactly? Into who's really pulling the strings. Who benefits if this information stays buried? She met my eyes directly. The raid on Volkov's party wasn't officially sanctioned, Andrei. It was our operation. Mine and Marcus's team. We were trying to extract Kravchenko and the evidence before anyone else could get to him. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You're telling me I'm caught between rogue FBI agents and God knows who else. CIA, Russian intelligence, private contractors, all fighting over information I might have accidentally overheard? That's about the size of it, yes. I laughed, a hollow sound that earned us curious glances from nearby passengers. Perfect. Just perfect. Look, I'm sorry you're involved in this. But right now, keeping you alive is my priority. Not just because you might have valuable information, but because I got you into this mess. By telling me to run. Yes. Her expression softened slightly. I saw you there night after night. Watching. Listening. Never part of it. I couldn't let you die for Volkov's sins. Something in her tone made me study her more carefully. There's more to it than that. Something personal. She looked away, watching the darkness of the tunnel through the windows. My brother, she finally said. He worked for a man like Volkov in Chicago. Low level like you, just trying to make ends meet after our parents died. When the FBI raided the operation, no one warned him. He was shot 3 times trying to surrender. Understanding dawned. That's why you risked warning me. Why you said sometimes we get a chance to break the cycle. She nodded once, sharply. He survived, barely. Spent 2 years in prison for crimes he was barely involved in, while his boss walked free because he was feeding information to the Bureau. Her jaw tightened. The system is broken, Andrei. Corrupted from within. That's what I'm really fighting against. The train slowed again. Zoe stood. This is us. We switched to the 1 train here. As we navigated the crowded platform, a news alert flashed on the station's information screen. The volume was muted, but the headline was clear. Mikhail Volkov confirmed dead in hotel explosion. Zoe saw it too, her step faltering momentarily. That's not possible, she murmured. Dmitri said he survived. Maybe Dmitri lied. Or maybe someone wants the world to think Volkov is dead. She pulled me toward the uptown platform. Either way, it changes nothing. We keep moving. But as we boarded the next train, I caught a glimpse of a man on the opposite platform, tall with the rigid posture of military training, his eyes scanning the crowd with predatory focus. Our gazes connected for a split second before the train doors closed between us. Zoe, I said quietly. I think we're being followed. She didn't question me, immediately moving us toward the far end of the car. How many? Just one that I saw. But he recognized me. Describe him. I did, watching her expression darken with each detail. That's Andrei Petrov. Volkov's enforcer. She checked her weapon discreetly. If he's here, Volkov is definitely alive. And coming for us. For you, she corrected. You're the loose end now. The train lurched to a stop between stations, the lights flickering ominously. An automated announcement apologized for the delay. Passengers sighed collectively, the familiar frustration of New York transit. But Zoe tensed, her hand moving to her concealed weapon. This isn't a coincidence. The lights went out completely, plunging the car into darkness save for the glow of phone screens. When they flickered back on seconds later, Andrei Petrov was standing at the far end of our car. And he was smiling. Time to run again, Zoe whispered, drawing her weapon as screams erupted around us. But this time there was nowhere to go. Have you ever faced a moment when all your choices seem to lead to the same destination? When running and standing your ground feel equally futile? That's where I found myself, trapped in a subway car with a killer at one end and the woman who had both saved and endangered me at the other. Sometimes the only way forward is through. And sometimes, the stranger who tells you to run becomes the reason you finally stop running and face what's coming. But that's a story for another time. If you enjoyed, the Russian mafia boss was toasting to love. When the black waitress suddenly whispered, "Run now," hit that like button and subscribe to Serafina's stories for more tales of unexpected connections and life-changing moments. Share in the comments if you've ever had a stranger change the course of your life with just a few words. Sometimes the most important warnings come from the most unexpected places.